Okay, Trickster.
Okay.
It says we're live on Facebook. What page is your live Facebook? Is it on your personal page or
Yeah.
what?
Yep. 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 That's where I
All
have a lot
right.
of people.
So
So
now,
we're Jeff. We're live now.
great.
You tell me when you can see me on Facebook.
I see you on Facebook. I'm just gonna put this
And
out to my community too.
we're ready to roll in 1 minute. I even found my old jingle from 8 years ago,
Wow, really? What about the bagel?
which Mickey discovered. The Bagel TV, we never had a jingle.
Oh, okay.
We had a bagel, but we never had a jingle. We can talk about Bagel TV if you like.
All right. The watch party is about to begin, so I'm now sharing your video.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm not going to be looking at it since we're actually looking at
No,
you.
that would not be a good idea.
That would be a bad idea.
Okay.
All right.
So great. So hi Jeff,
Hi,
uh,
Mel.
Jeff Pulver, the second guest on the show. Yesterday we had a new friend, Mike Sullivan, and today we have a very old buddy, dear friend, and you've been on the show before in its previous iteration at IDC. You've got Mel. So Mickey Pellet has discovered the old jingle.
Oh,
So
wow.
so I'm going to share screen, and we're going to watch the and listen to the old jingle from 8 years ago. Um, let's see. You ready, Jeff?
I am ready.
Let's go.
Get a chair, grab a seat, or we'll sweep you off your feet. We move, we groove, you got Mel. Ease your legs, rest a while, all you gotta do is smile. We're swell, can't you tell? You got Mel. When the show begins, you better hold on real tight, or before you know it, you'll be high as a kite. Take a break, settle down, we're the only show in town. It's our road, don't you know? You got Mel. Give it up, don't think twice. We're a hurricane on ice. What the hell? Give it yell, ring your bell, show and tell. Mademoiselle, give a smell. You got Mel. You
Wow.
got Mel.
You got Mel. Very nice. Very nicely done.
Thank you.
Wow.
So Jeff, it's wonderful to see you here. And in our previous iteration on You've Got Mel, it was just us, a couple of microphones, asynchronous, a radio show, and now it's a synchronous show across the seas. You haven't been with us in Israel for quite a while, but you're very much in our hearts. And we have so many things to talk about. I Can you start with just like a 1 minute for those people who don't know you, although many people do. Why is Jeff Pulver?
Why is Jeff Pulver? That's a philosophical question, maybe, or
How about you? With your career, what are you best known for?
well, I believe I'm best known for being misunderstood at times, because I believe what I'm best known for is helping to change the way the world communicates, but people don't know that. So that's the misunderstanding. People know me from different things I have done and been part of, but I did help create change.
What
And
is the Pulver order?
that became the foundation for why so many people in the US and then ultimately around the world have been able to benefit from effectively free voice and video services. It's because it's a ruling. I had a premonition in 2003. I went to Washington with some attorney friends of mine, and a year later, the government created a law that basically said that voice that originates on the internet and by default video that doesn't touch any legacy network is not to be regulated as telecom, which at that moment in time was a monumentous occasion. It helped change the direction of large telecom companies, and it helped inspire so many people to come forward with innovative ideas and ways to communicate. And so the Pulver Order, it was, for me, one of the most exciting things to have ever been part of. And if anyone would have explained to me how difficult it is to go to Washington and a year later actually get a law in your name, I never would have done it. But because I didn't know about it, how the difficulty was, I just went ahead and it happened.
But
And
like our young startup entrepreneurs, they don't know how difficult it is to have a successful company.
yes,
Well,
you
we'll
just
come back to that in a minute. But Jeff, so what you're telling me is the fact that we're able to use Zoom today and Facebook and talk to one another and the world for free is because of the Pulver Order, essentially.
Part of it is, I mean, public policy has shifted over the last bit of time, but in certainly the beginning days of it, yes.
Yeah.
Uh, there's, yes, that is the bottom line. That with the Pulver Order combined with all the years I spent helping to foster and grow a very nascent industry, we ended up changing the world. And
Yeah.
the voice,
And
it's
what award did you win 2 years ago?
yes. 2 years ago, Shankar awarded me with a very special collegiate honor, something which, other than having a college degree, I never got anything from any college. So I'm very proud to be associated forever with Shankar, and I actually have the award framed. It was a very lovely ceremony held 2 summers ago. It was 2 summers ago,
Yeah.
3 summers ago. It was a really nice award. Um, it,
You also have an award from the American internet industry.
oh yes, I've been acknowledged a little bit, but the thing is, when you're misunderstood, you're a misfit, right? And so, what I think I'm best, because I don't fit into too many boxes, right? So to me, having the freedom and learning to be who you are is one of the best gifts you can share with anybody, and to become who you are is one of those things that just happen. So it's to answer your question, what am I known for? It's for not fitting in and at the same time affecting change.
For being a misfish.
A misfish, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but
A misfish.
you're a misfish who changed the world. So you were acknowledged as one of the internet pioneers a few years ago,
Yes.
together with Alon Cohen, who actually invented voice over IP.
Well, he's the one who figured out how to make it work. A lot of people tried, but his ability to engineer created a working product, which is much like, well, we all wanted to have the light bulb, but who figured out how to let that filament not burn out? That's
Exactly.
alone.
Yeah, and you were one of the first people in the world to recognize the potential of this because as a kid you were a
Ham radio operator. But really, most people, when that product first came out, they were not very widely accepted because most people did not understand why in the world you want to talk on the internet to strangers.
exactly.
But having come not from the telecom world, but the world of amateur radio, I grew up talking to strangers and loved the idea of being able to connect with people from all over the place. So for me, it was instant love.
So Jeff, here we are now, and young people seeing you should know that you built a company, a conference company that you sold almost 20 years ago for how many dollars?
Many. We'll leave it at many. It was, but certainly something which I
More
never
than 50
envisioned.
million or less than 50 million?
50 billion, a lot less than 50 billion.
No, million,
Um,
million.
well,
You're not Bill Gates, I mean.
no, 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 no. It sold. Look, I was able to very successfully in a very short period of time create a business that generated revenue that I was able to sell at a multiple of the revenue. Unfortunately, well, very lucky for me, I sold the business the day before 9/11. Unfortunately for me, it happened the day before 9/11, and any upside to the deal disappeared. So it was a 50, I think on paper, a $57 million deal. They got watered down to about 40 or so due to the effects of 9/11. But when the deal was being negotiated, it sounded like a very big deal to me. And it's not understanding. One of those magical things about being a misfish, a misfit, is being open to what can be. It's like you manifest magic. And so I did not start that company with the expectation of selling it ever. I decided to start that company to live my passion. The fact that I had an opportunity to sell it was both a magical opportunity and then actually a lot of learning because I never knew how much I loved what I did. That when I didn't have it anymore, I was so depressed, and so I was able to 17 months later get it back and rebuild it again. So it's the money is part of it, but for me, it's the opportunity to affect positive change that was the true driver of what I continue to do.
You've been passionate all these years in lecturing to young people about entrepreneurship, even to old people like me. Our books started 7 years ago this week.
Congratulations.
and thank you. And you gave us the best advice. I should add that you've been an advisor to us all through these years. You never asked for a penny. And we appreciate that because we don't have any money to give anybody right now. But it's just an indication of your generosity. You've been very generous, investing in how many startups over the past 20 years?
More than 400.
That's too many. And
I agree. I cannot name them all.
what would you like to tell us? How you pick young people, what you teach young people? Um, you get to choose.
Well, when I was in Israel to meet with startups, I look for people who are open to success and not and also open to change. I mean, one of the things I love about music and love about charting the career of artists is that many artists, not everyone, but most artists make it on their third album. And when I look at startups, I look for teams that are tight, very smart, but are not too stubborn to if you will pivot into their success and have what it takes to find themselves hopefully within two, three, four, 5 iterations of what they do. And so for me, I look for people who are creative and brilliant, and I encourage people to dream, and I encourage people as best as possible to be their dream and not to hold back, and to understand that the next person you meet can change your life, and that if you see the world differently than anybody else and no one gets what you want to do, it's not a reason not to pursue your startup, because most innovation never would have happened if everyone who had that innovation went to their friends and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" But eventually, you get the courage to live your dream and to push your ideas forward, maybe because you don't know you can't do it, and that becomes the biggest change agent of all. And
Okay,
so,
but we have the problem with the young people, Jeff, that we know that the chance of success in establishing the startup is maybe 1 in 100 at best.
maybe it's 1 in 1,000. I mean, it's
Exactly.
not
So
easy.
I was being kind now. So how do we? Why are we engendering this? Why are we telling? Yeah, here I'll fix my eyebrows now. Why are we telling young people
Well, to
to
dream,
go
I mean,
ahead and do this against all odds?
well, look, there are some people who go to school who want to work in a government job or they want to work for a large corporation because they're risk adverse. And they grow up in a world where they want everything to be certain as best as it can be. And because startup life is not for everybody. And there's some people who just need a way to be expressive of what they want. And some of those people end up seeing the world differently. And it's through their eyes that the shift happens. And so it's not so much to encourage everybody to be a startup, but at some point of our lives, we may never be the CEO of a large company, but we have to be the CEO of our life. We have to take responsibility for who we are, what we do, and what choices we make. And as long as you run your life as if you're the CEO and you're not outsourcing those decisions, then it's not as important, really, to me, as far as what you end up doing, because you do it with intention and purpose. It's when people who don't focus, who don't know what to do, and blame everyone else on what they don't do, as opposed to taking initiative and doing it. So if someone wants to work, wants a career, wants a profession, that's amazing. And if somebody wants to take an idea and pursue that dream, that's amazing. It helps, in the startup world. If you happen to be, if you're doing a tech startup, it helps if you're technical. You don't have to be the lead singer. The lead singer of a band doesn't have to necessarily play an instrument, and the CEO of a startup that I've invested in doesn't necessarily have to write code, but they have to have a tight team of people, some people who do write code, so that whatever ideas are coming out have a way of being presented. And so I am open to meeting all sorts of people, and just because somebody's known to be a great singer doesn't mean they can't also be an awesome startup. And one thing I found in Israel was many of the startups I invested in actually were bands. It's as silly as it sounds. I think 5 or 6 of them, the people actually had their own band, and oh by the way, they had an idea for a startup, and I thought that was very magical, and because it was just a living example of what teamwork is really about, how to stay in tune, how to stay in sync, and how to innovate.
Do we know of any young musicians who recently raised a few $100 million for their startup?
Uh, well, you mean Yoni?
Oh, who is Yoni?
Yoni Blow.
Tell us about Yoni.
Well, this is a few years ago. I believe Yoni
Did you
was
invest in his startup?
just my time. I never had the opportunity to actually invest any money, but I did invest my time and I provided guidance in the early days. I explained to him who he needed to meet, the one person when he came to New York who he needed to see, and it worked out well. And he, in Israel, he is a rock star. He makes music. He was, I believe, the first person in Israel in music culture to be discovered on the internet. That his music was out there, and then his fans found it, and he rose to popularity before anyone ever saw him.
But he was actually a geek while he was a musician.
We're all geeks, whether we like it or not, right? We're all everything. But yes, he was a geeky musician who's quite talented and whose band members turned out to be great developers. And when he made that transition from being a musician to being a startup, I'm pretty sure the two people from his band are also two people that was part of his original team. I have not seen Yoni in a couple of summers, but last I checked, he has a young family and he's raised quite a bit of money to pursue innovative ideas in video. And
So, Yoni, if you're listening, we wish you well, and we're still here,
we are still here. Yes.
sending you our love and good thoughts. So Jeff, what else do you tell to young people? How do you choose them? Do they have to be musicians?
No, no, they do not have to be musicians, but they have to be curious. If people are reaching out to me, they have a question. For many years, although it's stopped now, many years people were writing papers about technology innovation and change, and particularly innovation and communications. And they would send me 10, 15 questions to answer, which I think if I actually answered all of them, it probably would have been their term paper. So in the beginning, and that lasted, has not happened for a few years, and it was annoying when it did, but it was very nice that it happened. There are people looking for help. They're looking for ideas. They're looking for connections. They're looking for validation.
So can young people still write to you and get advice?
They can try. Yes. They don't so much. But yes, they could. And certainly whenever I've been on campus at Shankar and other places with you,
You're a tremendous resource for our students. I can tell you that. And
it's when you see people with great potential, the hardest part is understanding how to divide the pushiness of what you see for them versus the respect you need to give them to find themselves. And so just because you see a direction for someone doesn't mean it's their direction right now. Timing has always been a challenge. I've invested in companies way too early in the market. Ultimately, some of the companies I invested in, their CEOs, the women and men that I met, would later in life become amazing startup founders, like the second or third time later.
so Jeff, you have to pick the people who have failed twice.
Well, or that's true too, because maybe they'll work with me. But it's a blessing to give someone to know, let someone know that you believe in them, because that changes the direction of their life, and it lets them know that others can believe with them as well. And philosophically, I don't run a charity. I may have made mistakes in investing, but I have no regrets for anyone who I've invested in.
You've made some clever investing decisions too.
It happens, when you have a large number of investments, sometimes you get it right. And for me, it's one of the biggest fallacies is people think that if I invest in a startup, I'm going to help promote them, and I don't do that. In my large portfolio of investments, never really knowingly promoted anybody. I mean, I did invest in Twitter early, and I used Twitter, but when I spoke about Twitter, I never thought about pushing my investment since many other people invested. But generally speaking, if someone is raising money and they're already successful, they raise most of what they're looking for, and they come to me to help tap off the investment, I was never interested in adding any money to it, because my dad would explain to me that believing in someone is a beautiful gift, and I'd much rather be one of the first people to find a person to believe in than one of the last people, because at some point money just becomes money and it's an entry in a spreadsheet, as opposed to sharing or connecting with someone's passion and trying to help them get move forward in what they're doing. It's like directed investing. I want to work with people who truly have the opportunity. And what I've learned is sometimes I invested in startups that never had enough capital to become successful, that their idea was great, but they didn't raise enough money in the beginning, so they never were going to be successful. And unfortunately, they didn't find other people like myself who also believed in them at that critical moment in time when they needed that money to go forward.
Yeah. So Jeff, here's the other side now. So what you tell our young people, you tell them first of all to go with your passion,
And to dream.
go
Eh,
against all odds, knowing you'll probably fail at least a few times.
Well, but define failure, right? Success, we think we know what success is, but failure, from my perspective, is not learning from failure. You see,
Okay.
when we're successful, we don't
Failure is
always know
not
why
learning
we're
from failure.
successful.
Okay, and
But
what is the most important thing you taught me as your buddy?
not to be shy when you see people you love. If you
Exactly.
don't ask, the answer is no.
That's right. The most important thing you taught me about life is if you don't ask,
The
the
answer is
answer
no,
is no,
which
which
is
I'm
what
not.
something my dad taught me.
Yeah. So your dad looms large in our conversations. Is he the person that you have to make proud of you?
No, I don't know. He's been gone for 22 years, but I miss him the most. And right when he was going through the year that he died, he took a year for his cancer to hit. I had an opportunity to sell my company early, and he was actually pushing me to sell, and I didn't. And I have no regrets for not selling. But I learned a lot about life. The hardest thing for me was he wanted me to continue not make any changes, don't stay home, continue to travel, continue to do everything he needed to do. So I did that. Meanwhile, I missed out on part of being with him in his final moments, which haunts me. But I like to believe I heard what he said, and I continue to do what he wants me to do.
We all have this issue of making our parents proud.
Yes, yes, and but I grew up in a family that embraced hobbies, and so as a misfit, some of my hobbies, which may sound very geeky to people now, but I love to build model rockets, and I love to let them launch and go up and see them. Sometimes they would parachutes would come out, sometimes they didn't. I love to create, and as a kid, it was nice to. I know it sounds terrible to say blow things up, but we weren't hurting anybody. We were just having fun, and that creative expression of being able to develop, to build, take things apart, put them back together, and to play. That to me was fun. And so every my both my sisters have hobbies in photography and art, and our family was a place where we were able to embrace our hobbies and take it to as far as we could. And frankly, it was my amateur radio hobby that gave me the launching part into the voice over IP industry because of my passion to run phone patches and connect people to bypass the telephone service and use amateur radio as a link for the long distance. And that became an idea that I executed on when I got involved on the internet in '95. And the reason I first got to notoriety is while many people heard of Napster, I created the Napster for telephone back in '95, and it went viral, and it was called Free World Dial-Up because it was a free way to make calls around the world. And just by having that fun and the ambition and just with no business model, no expectations other
Yeah,
than
Jeff, you're a believer in no business model.
I am. I find, first of all, in real life, only once when I was pitching a business did I ever really have a business model. And most of the time when I invest in companies, I don't look for projections. I look for the people, because unless they are a meta human of sorts, most projections never happen. It's just a brain test to see whether or not you have the ability to share your ideas numerically. And so it's like it's just an intelligence test. So you never, as a startup, never can you really accurately get your income right. Maybe you can project expenses, and so and also to some extent, forcing a business model on top of your business when you're first getting started limits your creativity, and ultimately may limit your success. We have to admit, this is my passion. I see an opportunity to do this and bring it forward, and believe enough that you will figure out where the money will come from once you get the tech right, once you get the pitch right, once you get the idea right.
But
And
at the
so
beginning, it has to be raw, childish exploration and fun.
and I would say fun. It needs to continue being fun in order for me to stay with that startup.
I mean,
Not that we're not willing
at
to.
some stage, the adults come in, right? And
Not always. Not
oh,
always. And we're adults now, so I can't say I'm still a kid, but I am still. I may look like an adult, but I'm still a kid. And that appreciation and need to be compliant and connect with people. But I like startups that have that feeling of freshness, of new ideas, of opportunity, of innovation, where no idea is a stupid idea. Just if you don't share your idea, that's stupid. And that we need a chance to grow and to change and to develop into who we're going to become. And that's the innovation that happens. It's that change that you see that no one else saw. And if your team can get it done before anyone else, it may be obvious to you now, but that company did it, you didn't. And so when it comes to startups and comes to just being you, it's right. Allow yourself not to be the person other people think you are, but be the person who you know you are, and pivot into yourself and let go of any other types of branding, and be proud of who you are and be you. And that,
this is so difficult, Jeff.
yes,
Finding your inner compass.
well, that inner compass, we need to press reset. It's like having that compass on Waze. You need to reset the direction you're going in, whether it's a company or you as a person. But if you have a company filled with people that are not who they are, you'll get nowhere.
Yeah.
That we need to.
So we talked the following: passion,
Yes,
hobbies,
yes,
be going against the flow,
yes,
not putting the business model ahead of the changing the world, and
yes.
not being afraid to fail. Uh,
Right.
and now we're just briefly tell the misfish story, because my background, especially for you today, these are misfish. The illustration is by Rote Bombery, and we actually have a made a book together on Jeff the Misfish, and who's Jeff? It's you.
That's me. Yes.
How was that born?
Well, I had a conference that we held for educators at the 92nd Street Y between the last week of July and August, and I held that event for 3 years, and it was a time when social media was affecting education, and it was being misunderstood, or at least the rules were trying to be created by the administrators, by the teachers, by the parents, certainly not by the kids. And there was a need to get together as a community and talk. And you were going to come and talk about being a misfit, since one of the things you and I have in common is that we've lived a life of being a misfit, knowing that we don't fit in always
From a very young age.
from a very young age. And while you were on stage, instead of saying the word misfit, you somehow said misfish, and that became a trending topic. And so that was the inspiration for Mel and the Misfish, and that became the inspiration to create the children's book, which I'm grateful to be in any kind of book, let alone a children's book like that. So thank you.
And who is your friend in the book?
Oh, my friend is Jimmy the Whale.
Who is actually,
Jimmy Wales.
yes, who's a
Yes.
friend of ours, and started something that took over the world, named
Oh, you mean Wikipedia?
Wikipedia.
Yes, yes. Jimmy the Whale did Wikipedia. Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
He's
So
a very friendly whale.
yeah. Another thing I want to suggest before we talk about the future is the importance of embracing mistakes. Um,
Yes,
you want to say misfit, and it comes out misfish, run with it, right?
exactly. That's the beauty, that we don't apologize necessarily for the mistakes, because maybe it was meant to be that way.
Yeah,
And
and
that,
mistakes. I teach my students that smart people learn from their mistakes, but very smart people patent them.
well, look, the reality is that it's the good mistakes we make that change the world.
Yeah.
When you're a scientist in a lab trying to do research, you don't always find what you're looking for, but you walk past. If you talk about how X-rays, how microwave ovens were created, or this was created, it was always someone's observation that was obvious, but it was a mistake, and all of a sudden things were created by not what they intended to do, but they had the ability to observe, and magic happened. And so good mistakes change the way we work and live. And most of the patents that we depend on every day, most of the products were created by people who didn't go out to do it, but it happened. I mean, from radiation on down, and it's a magical thing about having a creative mind and being able to observe and understand that the goal is not necessarily what you state, but it truly is the journey of going there and being out there and being open to seeing what you can get. And then magic strikes at any moment, just like lightning.
Right. So making mistakes is actually not to be condoned. It's actually to be welcome,
Embraced.
embraced and welcome.
Yes.
So Jeff, before we hug you
Oh, well,
and
from
leave you,
afar, from afar.
of course, Corona free, of course. What my last question for you today, and of course I'll have you back on the show if the show lasts, and I hope it will.
Well, it
Um,
will last forever. We know that. That we, you brought this back. It will come back. It's always good.
exactly. While we're here, while I have you here on the air, without talking about the situation now, because that's verbatim on the show, how do you think the world is going to change? Let's say a couple of years from now.
Well, it depends upon what part of the world and who. But let me just say that when it comes to travel, I believe that individuals who can afford to will travel much more with purpose and intention for personal reasons. That going on trips to see loved ones with loved ones, to enjoy nature, to enjoy the world, to just have fun, will be on the rise. I believe people of a certain age probably will see a major drop off of business travel. I believe that people who are used to attending very large conferences, tech events, where 50,000, 70,000, 100,000 people would show up, not so much. And I think that forever we now understand, even though it was a CEO of AT&T who in 1964 said video was the future. That was in 64 World's Fair. It
Wow.
took multiple generations for us to realize, gee, I can communicate effectively and efficiently right now overseas using the internet. And I can see the person, I can hear the person, I can do business. So no need for me to jump on an airplane to do a 2 hour meeting in LA or a 3 hour meeting in London. I can just do it here. And while I do miss the physical contact and being able to give a friend a hug and just to say, just to share their company, I think in the future, business is going to be different. I mean, unless every major airline's going to reconfigure the seating in their aluminum tubes to give us the equivalent of first class for everybody with social distancing, I just don't see life happening. I think that not that we all will be germaphobes, but frankly, you as a microbiologist know more than anyone else as far as about much of the science behind this, and how maybe we'll have a world with a little less disease being picked up by people who are doing silly things and sharing those diseases. I don't know, but from a business perspective, I'm working on the future right now, and I'm building businesses where I'm looking at for a conference room in an office to actually be the room you enter to attend a conference. And that I think that the word room will be redefined. I don't think that a classroom needs to be a room anymore. Years ago during the transition of digital photography, a darkroom never needed to be a darkroom anymore, and certainly a boardroom's not necessarily in a board. You're and so we're going to
A
redefine what
blackboard doesn't
a
have to be
room.
black.
Right. We were able to change the definitions of what we grew up with, and be unbounded is where they can take us, and we could seriously rely on the robustness of these technologies to be dynamic enough so that meetings will happen, conversations will take place, people will connect. What's certainly proven this what I've learned from this is that voice matters. I've told everyone for the last 25 years that voice remains the killer app. That no, whenever there's a doubt or uncertainty, hearing someone's voice matters the most. That there's more emotion shared in a voice than any kind of words. And just being able to tell a loved one, I love you, and share a moment with you is priceless. And so, the phone companies, while they went to flat rate pricing for voice services, they've seen an uptick on people not texting, but calling and spending time connecting. And I think that we will be a much more connected world,
Yeah,
that we have an
this
opportunity.
is crazy. Like my sister and I in Israel, and my brother and sister in Canada, we get together over WhatsApp once a week now.
It's
And we
because
could have done this for years, but
but
we
we never did. But we shifted, right? So when I look to the future, I look for a more connected planet. And I believe that the more we communicate with each other, less likely we could be misunderstood. The more open we are and the more true we are to who we are, that we live our soul, that we allow ourselves to be, not to be afraid of what we believe in, not to be afraid of who we truly are, and to express ourselves. The more connected we are on the inside to the outside, the more effective and efficient everything will be. So I believe in the near term and not so near term, travel with loved ones to see loved ones goes up. People will do things that they were holding back on because they didn't want to. But at the same time, business travel and the entire leisure time activity industry associated with business, I don't see it coming back. I see it
How about
shifting.
business travel to the office?
I think that's going to be dramatically reduced. I think that people who have a place to live will allocate a part of their life to working from where they live and figure that out. That look, I don't believe that incubators and accelerators will continue as they used to. I don't think that companies will be pushed together in one room inside of a building anymore. I think companies and straight office space, that's all out the window too. Everything that's all shifting. I think that some of those buildings that were reconfigured for cooperative working spaces probably become condominiums. They become
Well,
place.
let's hope they become condominiums and not hospitals.
Let's hope that we have enough hospital beds, enough ICU beds to serve the world, and that we get a handle on these pandemics, and that we allow science to drive what happens, and not politics. You know, I'm old enough to say, though, that I didn't take any poli sci classes, but there was when I was in university, political science had nothing to do about the science versus politics. It was something else. And yet today in America, they play poli sci against each other, the ends against each other. It makes no sense to me. So
Okay,
I
Jeff,
like to believe.
we're not going to get now involved in the polemics of
No,
the.
no, I just think that I believe in science. I'll leave it at that. I believe in science.
Okay, I believe in people that believe in science. So
Me
Jeff,
too.
we're coming to the end of a wonderful interview. I continue to dream, continue to use your passion to change the world. When you go to bed at night, you should realize that you are one of the people whose passion, starting with a little child with a hobby because you were a misfish, turned into a love for communication, which enabled you to identify a technology which changed the world. So salute you for that, my dear friend,
Thank you.
and take care of yourself in the United States of America or this United States of America. Oops, I said I wouldn't go
No
there.
politics. No
No
politics.
politics. Love you,
You too.
and people who want your advice, if they find you, then perhaps you'll answer them.
Yes. There's that. Thank you so much, and thanks for the opportunity to be one of your guests, Mel. Thank you.
Big hug, Jeff.
Big
What do you
hug.
mean? You're my second guest.
Thank you.
We just started yesterday. Love you. Love you.
Love you.
Take
Love you.
care.